The wind howled across the white wasteland. Snow and ice stretched as far as the eye could see. The sky was gray, heavy with clouds, and the ground cracked beneath each frozen step. The alien mother held her child close to her chest, wrapping her thin cloak around his shivering body. Her own body trembled from the cold, but she tightened her arms, trying to share what little warmth she had. They had been walking for hours, maybe days. She could not tell anymore. Time was lost in this endless winter where the sun gave no heat and the night never truly ended. Her legs ached, her stomach groaned with hunger, and her lips were cracked from thirst, but worse than all of that was the fear. Fear that she would fall. Fear that her child would not survive the next hour. The boy clung to her, whispering weakly, "Mama, I am cold." She kissed the top of his head and forced her voice to stay strong. "I know, little star, hold on, we will find shelter." But she did not know if she was lying. Every direction looked the same, endless snow, sharp ice, and dead silence. Suddenly the silence broke. There was a sound, heavy and slow, like footsteps pressing into the ice. The mother froze, her breath caught in her throat. The boy lifted his head, his wide eyes full of fear. They both listened. The sound came again, closer this time. Something or someone was following them. She turned her head quickly, scanning the frozen horizon. Through the blowing snow, she thought she saw a shape, tall and dark, moving with purpose. Her heart raced. Her people had been hunted before, dragged into chains or left for dead. She could not let that happen to her child. She pressed him tighter against her chest and forced her legs to move faster, almost running through the deep snow. The wind cut at her face, the cold burned her lungs, but she kept going. Behind her, the footsteps grew louder, stronger. Whoever followed them was not weak, not starving like her. She stumbled, fell to her knees, snow covering her arms. The boy cried softly, his tears freezing on his cheeks. She pulled herself up with trembling hands and pushed forward. Her heart screamed that this was the end. Then, through the storm, a faint light appeared. It was far away, barely glowing, but it was real. A warm flicker in the distance, like fire. Her legs shook, but she walked toward it, hope and fear fighting inside her chest. The boy whispered, "Mama, light," his voice so weak it almost broke her. "Yes, light," she answered, praying it was not a trick, not a trap. The footsteps behind her slowed, as if the figure also noticed the light. The mother almost collapsed when she reached the edge of a rocky wall. A cave mouth yawned before her, black and wide. Inside the darkness, the glow of fire danced on the stone walls. Smoke rose faintly, disappearing into the storm above. She hesitated at the entrance, clutching her child. If someone lived here, they had food, warmth, maybe safety. But they could also be cruel, dangerous, willing to kill her for stepping inside. Her heart pounded so loud she thought it would wake the whole cave. Yet behind her, the footsteps grew nearer. The figure in the storm was almost at her back. She had no choice. With a final breath, she stepped into the cave. The warmth of the fire brushed her frozen skin, making her eyes water. The boy stirred weakly, his little hands reaching toward the flames. She wanted to cry, but she bit her lip and stayed quiet. At the far side of the cave, sitting by the fire, was a figure, tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in rough clothes and furs. He turned his head slowly, and the firelight revealed a human face. The mother gasped and stepped back. Her people had told stories of humans, strange survivors who came from the stars. Some said they were monsters, others said they were protectors. She did not know which one stood before her now. The human's eyes narrowed, studying her and the child in her arms. His hand rested near, a weapon on his side, but he did not raise it. The fire crackled between them, filling the silence with sparks. The boy stirred again and whimpered, "Mama, food." The sound broke her heart, and for the first time she lowered her head before the stranger. Her voice shook as she whispered, "Please, he is hungry, he is cold." The human did not answer at once, he only stared at them through the firelight. Outside, the storm raged and the footsteps faded into silence. The wasteland was still waiting, but now, inside the cave, 3 lives had met. None of them knew what would happen next. But the frozen wasteland had just changed forever. The fire crackled inside the cave, throwing sparks into the cold air. Shadows danced along the rocky walls, shifting with every flicker of flame. The alien mother stood, frozen at the entrance, her child pressed tightly to her chest. The human sat by the fire, silent, his eyes locked on her with a calm but unreadable stare. Neither moved, neither spoke. The storm outside roared, but inside the cave was a silence heavy with danger. Her legs trembled, not only from the cold, but from fear. She had heard whispers about humans, strong wanderers, dangerous fighters. Some said they saved the weak. Others said they destroyed without mercy. She could not risk her child's life, yet she could not turn away. The warmth of the fire brushed against her skin, pulling her forward, even as her fear pushed her back. The boy whimpered softly, his small voice breaking the silence. "Mama, food," he whispered, his eyes fixed on the fire as if it was the sun itself. The mother's heart cracked. Her pride told her not to beg, but her love for her child was stronger than pride. She lowered her head and whispered, "Please. He needs warmth. He needs food." The human's eyes narrowed. His hand moved closer to the weapon at his belt. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he leaned forward, reaching into a small metal pot that sat above the fire. He pulled out a rough wooden bowl and filled it with steaming liquid. The smell hit the mother's nose at once. Soup. Real food. Not frozen roots or dry leaves. Her legs almost gave way as hunger rushed through her body. The human placed the bowl carefully on the ground near the fire, then leaned back again. He did not smile. He did not speak, but his action was clear. He was offering food. The mother looked at him with wide, uncertain eyes, her body shaking. Was it a trick, poisoned food to weaken them? Or was it kindness? Real kindness? She did not know, but the child reached out weakly, his small hand trembling toward the bowl. She crouched low, slowly moving closer, her arms still tight around the boy. She picked up the bowl, the warmth almost burning her freezing fingers. The steam rose, carrying the smell of life itself. She lifted the bowl to the child's lips, helping him drink. The boy sipped greedily, his eyes closing, a tiny sigh escaping his mouth. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, he felt warmth in his belly. The mother's eyes filled with tears. She had not cried in years. She took a sip herself. The taste was plain, but to her, it was more precious than gold. Every swallow felt like a spark of strength returning to her bones. She looked up again. The human was still watching, his face calm, unreadable, but his eyes had softened just a little. She whispered, "Thank you," her voice trembling. The human nodded once, still silent, as if words were too heavy to waste. He leaned back against the stone wall and pulled a thick fur cloak tighter around his shoulders. The firelight painted his face in sharp lines. Scars across his cheek told a story of battles long past. His hair was rough, his beard thick. He looked worn but unbroken, a man shaped by survival. The boy finished the bowl and leaned against his mother's chest, finally able to sleep. His small breaths warmed her skin. Her heart eased for the first time in forever. But her mind did not rest. She knew danger was not gone. The world outside was full of predators, and now she was trapped inside a cave with one of the most dangerous creatures of all, a human. The fire burned lower as the night dragged on. The mother tried to stay awake, watching the human carefully. Every time his hand shifted near the weapon, her heart raced, but he never drew it. He never moved toward her. Instead, he stared into the flames, his face far away, as if remembering something she could never see. Outside, the storm screamed across the wasteland, snow piled higher at the cave entrance, sealing them in. The mother realized that leaving now was impossible. If the human meant to harm them, there was nowhere to run. She closed her eyes for a moment, pressing her lips to her child's hair. "If he kills us, at least, you will not be cold anymore," she whispered in her heart, Then suddenly a sound broke through the storm. A howl, low and deep, echoing across the frozen land. The human's head lifted at once, his body tense. The mother's blood turned to ice. She knew that sound. Predators, the snow beasts that hunted in packs, creatures with glowing eyes and teeth sharp as knives. They had followed her before, but now they had found the cave. The human rose slowly, his hand gripping a weapon of steel, a blade long and sharp glinting in the firelight. He stepped toward the entrance, his movements calm but strong. The mother clutched her child close, her heart hammering in her chest. She wanted to run deeper, into the cave. But there was no way out, only stone walls and darkness. The human stood before the fire, his back to them, facing the mouth of the cave. The wind roared, the howls grew closer, shadows moved in the snow. The mother held her breath, waiting for death, but the human did not step back, he did not hide. He stood like a wall, tall and unshaken, ready to face the storm outside. In that moment, the mother realized something. This human was not just a wanderer, not just a stranger. He was a fire in the frozen wasteland. And tonight, his fire might be the only thing that kept her and her child alive. The storm raged outside, the howls of predators echoing through the frozen night. The human stood at the cave's entrance, his weapon ready, his eyes sharp as steel. The alien mother crouched near the fire, her child wrapped tightly in her arms. Every heartbeat felt like a hammer in her chest, fear pressed down on her like the weight of the mountain. Then came the sound, claws scraping against the ice. Yellow eyes glowed in the dark beyond the cave. One pair, then two, then many. The snow beasts were circling, hungry, patient, waiting for weakness. The mother whispered prayers under her breath, rocking her child softly. The boy stirred, half asleep, whispering, "Mama, I'm hungry," before falling silent again. Her heart broke. The beasts outside wanted them, and hunger inside wanted them too. The human moved forward, standing firm, in the mouth of the cave. The beasts stepped closer, their shadows shifting in the snow. With a sudden growl, the first beast leapt, its jaws wide, teeth glinting in the firelight. The human swung his blade with precision, steel met flesh, and the beast crashed to the ground, lifeless. The others snarled, their glowing eyes burning brighter. But the human did not flinch. He raised his weapon again. The mother gasped, watching as the human fought. Each strike was strong, each movement sharp. As if he had done this 100 times before, the beast snapped and lunged, but one by one he drove them back. The snow outside turned dark with blood, the howls faded, until at last silence returned. Only the wind remained, carrying away the scent of death. The human stepped back into the cave, his breath heavy, his blade wet with blood. He tossed the weapon aside and crouched by the fire. For the first time since she saw him, he looked tired, his shoulders heavy, his eyes dim. He reached into his pack and pulled out a piece of hard bread, breaking it in half, without a word. He set one half on the stone floor near her. The other half he chewed slowly, not taking his eyes off her. The mother stared at the bread, her hands trembling. Her pride screamed at her not to touch it, her fear told her it could be poisoned. But her child stirred again, whispering weakly, "Food, Mama." Her heart softened. She reached out, picked up the bread, and broke it into tiny pieces. She placed one piece in her son's mouth, his eyes fluttered open. The boy chewed slowly, swallowing, a faint smile touching his lips for the first time in days. The mother tasted it too, dry and hard, but to her it was life itself. Her throat burned as she swallowed. Tears filled her eyes. She looked up. The human was still watching, but there was no cruelty in his gaze, only caution, and something else she could not name. Slowly, carefully, she whispered, "Thank you." The human gave a small nod, nothing more. The boy finished his share quickly, then leaned against her chest, whispering, "Warm, Mama," before drifting into sleep again. She wrapped her cloak tighter around him, her body aching with relief. but her mind still wrestled with fear. Why had the human helped them? Why had he shared food? Her people had told her never to trust outsiders, especially humans. Yet here was a man who had fought beasts and given bread without asking anything in return. The fire burned lower. Shadows stretched longer across the cave walls. The human rose once more, adding a log of wood to the flames. The light grew brighter again, warming the cold stone. For a moment, the mother allowed herself to breathe deeply. Her body felt heavier, as if it finally believed it could rest. But her eyes stayed fixed on the human, her thoughts spinning. The silence stretched until at last she spoke again, her voice quiet. "Why help us?" The human did not answer immediately. He stared into the fire, his jaw tight. Then slowly he said, "Because you needed it." His words were rough, his voice deep, but there was no hatred in it. The mother blinked, her heart caught between fear and wonder. It was such a simple answer, yet it carried a weight she could not understand. Her child shifted in sleep, his small hand falling from her cloak onto the cold stone. The human glanced at him, his eyes softening for the briefest moment. The mother saw it, the flicker of something human, something kind. She clutched her child tighter, whispering, "He is all I have." The human did not reply, but he nodded once, his eyes still on the flames. The night dragged on, but no more beasts came. The storm slowly calmed, the howls fading into the distance. Inside the cave, the fire burned steady, 3 lives bound by chance. The mother felt sleep pulling at her, but she fought it. She did not want to close her eyes near a stranger, but her body betrayed her, heavy with exhaustion. As her eyes closed, the last thing she saw was the human still awake, still watching, his hand resting near his blade, his eyes fixed on the cave entrance. He was guarding, not only himself, but them too. For the first time since the wasteland swallowed her world, she felt something small, fragile, but real. Hope. The morning came slowly. Hidden behind thick gray clouds, the storm outside had calmed, but the world remained frozen and empty. Snow stretched to every horizon, silent and endless. Inside the cave, the fire had burned low. Only glowing embers remained. The mother opened, her eyes, her body stiff, her arms still wrapped tightly around her child. For a moment she thought it had been a dream. The warmth, the food, the safety, all of it seemed impossible. But the sight of the human sitting by the fire reminded her. It was real. He sat quietly, sharpening his blade with slow, steady strokes. His face looked hard, but his eyes were alert, scanning the cave entrance. The boy stirred in her arms, his small voice rising weakly. "Mama, hungry." Her heart sank. She had nothing left to give him. But before despair could break her, the human pulled something from his pack. A strip of dried meat, rough and simple, but food nonetheless. He tossed it across the fire, the strip landing near her feet. The mother stared at it, then at him, her hands trembling. He said nothing, only nodded once, as if telling her it was safe. She broke the strip into smaller pieces, placing one in her son's mouth. The boy chewed slowly, his eyes lighting with small joy. The mother allowed herself a single breath of relief, but her peace did not last. From outside came a sound, faint but sharp, not the howl of beasts this time, but something else. A crunch in the snow, too heavy, too careful, like footsteps trying not to be heard. The human froze, his head tilting slightly, his hand tightening around his blade. The mother's body went cold, fear racing through her veins. She had lived long enough to know that danger had many forms. Predators hunted for flesh, but hunters, real hunters, hunted for power. The human rose slowly, silent as stone, his eyes locked on the cave mouth. He motioned with his hand for her to stay back, his movements sharp and commanding. She obeyed, pressing her son tightly against her chest. The boy looked up, confused, whispering, "Mama, what is it?" "Shh," she whispered, stroking his hair. The shadows outside shifted, faint outlines moving behind the snow. At least 2, maybe. More? Then a voice called out, harsh and cold, "We saw your fire, stranger." The human's jaw tightened. his blade ready, but he did not reply. Another voice followed, cruel and mocking. "Bring out what you hide. We saw them enter your cave." The mother's blood froze. They were not after the human. They were after her and her child. She had heard of these men, scavengers who hunted the weak, selling them to whoever paid. The highest price? Her body shook, her hands trembling as she pressed her son closer. The boy buried his face into her cloak, whispering, "Mama, I'm scared." Tears filled her eyes, but she forced her voice to stay calm. "Stay quiet, little star, stay quiet." The human stepped forward, his body blocking the firelight. His shadow stretched tall against the cave wall. With a low voice, he called back, "Leave now." The men outside laughed, their cruel voices echoing. "Or what, human? You will fight us all. Better share, or we will take everything." The air grew heavy. The mother's chest tightened. She knew what men like this could do. She had seen villages burned, families torn apart. Her heart screamed at her to run, but there was nowhere to go. The cave walls were solid stone, no secret path, no escape. All she had was the human between them and the shadows outside. The first man stepped into view, his body wrapped in furs, his eyes sharp and hungry. Another followed behind him carrying a crude weapon. Both stared into the cave with greedy smiles. When they saw her holding the boy, their grins grew wider. "Look at this, human," one of them sneered. "A fine price for the woman, an extra for the child." The mother's heart pounded so hard she thought it would break her ribs. She held her son tighter, whispering prayers through trembling lips. The human did not move, did not flinch. He only said, "Leave now, this is your last chance." The men laughed again, stepping closer, the firelight glinting off their weapons. Then the human moved, swift as lightning. His blade flashed, striking the first man before he could blink. The scavenger screamed, stumbling back, his blood spilling into the snow. The second man roared, raising his weapon, but the human met him head-on. Steel clashed, sparks flew. The cave echoed with the sound of battle. The mother covered her child's eyes, but she could not look away. The human fought with a fury she had never seen. Every strike was precise, every movement controlled. Within moments, the second man fell, the snow drinking his blood. The silence returned, broken only by the boy's soft sobs. The human stood in the firelight, his chest rising and falling, his blade dripping red. He did not look at her at first, only at the cave entrance, making sure no others followed. When he finally turned, his eyes met hers, sharp but calm. "You are safe," he said simply, his voice rough but steady. The mother's tears fell freely, her body shaking. She had feared the human at first, but now she saw the truth. He had not only fed them, not only given them warmth, he had stood between them and death itself. Her heart whispered words she had never dared before, words of fragile trust. She held her son close, whispering into his hair, "We live, little star. We live because of him." The boy lifted his tired eyes, looking at the human with quiet wonder. And for the first time he smiled. The cave no longer felt safe. The bodies of the scavengers lay in the snow outside, their blood frozen black against the white ground. The mother could not stop trembling, her arms tight around her child. The boy had stopped crying, but his little chest rose weakly with every breath. His strength was fading. Even food and warmth could not hide the sickness growing inside him. The human stood near the entrance, staring out into the wasteland. His blade was clean again, his face calm, but his eyes were sharp. He knew more would come. Scavengers always hunted in packs, and when two did not return, others would follow. Staying here was death, leaving was danger, but it was the only path. He turned back toward the mother and spoke, his voice rough. "We move." She looked at him with wide eyes, fear flashing in her gaze. "Out there," she whispered, her voice breaking. "There is only snow, only death." The human shook his head, his expression hard but steady. "There is a place far to the west," he said, pointing through the storm. "An outpost, old but strong, maybe still alive. Her heart leapt at the word alive, but doubt pressed, heavy on her. Could she risk her child's last strength on a march through endless ice? She had no answer. But when her son coughed weakly against her chest, the choice was made. Anywhere was better than waiting here to die. The human gathered his pack, tightened his furs, and stamped out the fire. Smoke rose, fading into the gray sky as if their brief safety had never existed. The mother followed, her child wrapped tightly in her cloak, her legs already weak. The human took the lead, each of his steps deep in the snow. The wind screamed again, sharp and biting, as if the world itself wanted to drive them back hour after hour they walked, the frozen wasteland endless before them. The human carried much of the weight, supplies strapped to his back, his pace steady. The mother stumbled often, but each time she forced herself up, whispering to her boy, "Hold on, little star, hold on." Her son's small hand clung to her cloak, his eyes half closed, his lips pale. Each breath rattled softly, like the whisper of a candle about to die. The world around them felt haunted. They passed the broken skeletons of villages buried under snow. Crumbling walls peeked through the ice, shattered doors hanging open as if the people had fled long ago. The mother could not stop staring at them, each ruin reminding her of her own home, her own people lost to the storm and hunger. Her chest ached, but she kept walking because her son still breathed. The human stopped once near a frozen river, kneeling to check the ice. He struck it with his blade, breaking through. Cold water rushed up, dark and sharp. He filled a metal flask and handed it to her. The mother hesitated, then drank, the cold water stinging her throat but easing her thirst. She let a few drops fall into her child's mouth, his small body twitching at the touch. But he swallowed. Weakly, as the day bled into night, the storm returned. Snow fell heavier, covering their tracks, biting into their skin. The mother's legs gave way and she collapsed into the snow, clutching her boy. Her vision blurred, black spots dancing before her eyes. The human turned at once, his eyes narrowing, his voice sharp. "Get up." "I cannot," she whispered, tears freezing on her cheeks. "I cannot. He is too weak. I am too weak." The human knelt, his face close to hers, his voice low but fierce. "If you stop now, he dies." The word struck her like a blade cutting through despair. She forced herself to rise, her body screaming but her arms tightening around her child. The human nodded once, then turned and knelt, motioning with his hand. "Give him," her eyes widened, fear flashing. "No, he is mine," she whispered, clutching her son tighter. The human's gaze did not waver, his voice steady. "He is dying. I can carry him faster, stronger. He lives if you let me." Her heart twisted, torn between fear and trust. But when her son coughed weakly, she could not refuse. With trembling hands, she passed him to the human. The man lifted the boy easily, wrapping him in his furs, carrying him against his chest. The boy's head rested on the human's shoulder, his small breath misting against the man's beard. The sight broke her and healed her at the same time. Her son looked safer there than he had in her arms. She walked beside them, her heart pounding with fear and gratitude. The human moved faster now, his strides longer, his strength unbroken. The mother followed, each step dragging, but hope pulling her forward. Through the night they marched, the wind screaming, the snow biting. Once, shadows appeared at the edge of the storm, glowing eyes watching from the darkness. The mother froze, but the human never stopped. His hand tightened on the hilt of his blade, but he walked on, his gaze fixed forward. The predators followed for a time, then melted back into the storm as if even they feared his fire. By dawn, her legs could no longer feel the ground. The world swayed before her eyes, every breath heavy and sharp. But ahead, through the white haze, she saw something. Dark shapes rising above the snow, broken towers, steel walls half buried in ice. The human stopped, shifting the boy in his arms, his voice low but firm. There. Her heart leapt, though fear still clawed at her. Was it truly safety? Or another trap she did not know? But as she looked at her son sleeping against the human's chest, she whispered, "Please let it be life. and together, step by step, they moved toward the shadows of the outpost. The ruins of the outpost loomed before them, half buried in snow and silence. Tall metal walls leaned at broken angles, towers shattered, doors twisted and rusted. Once it had been strong, a place of safety, but now it was a graveyard of steel. The human stopped at the edge, shifting the boy gently in his arms. The mother stood beside him, her breath ragged, her eyes wide with both fear and hope. "Is it safe?" she whispered. The human's eyes scanned the shadows, his face hard. "No place is safe," he muttered, "but here we may find shelter." With steady steps he entered first, his blade ready in one hand, the boy held against his chest with the other. The mother followed, clutching her cloak tight, her eyes darting across every dark corner. The inside smelled of rust and old smoke. Snow had pushed through broken windows, covering the floor in white patches. They passed the remains of machines, silent and frozen. In one corner, a skeleton lay slumped against a wall, its armor cracked, its weapon broken. The mother shuddered, whispering a prayer for the dead. The boy stirred in the human's arms, coughing weakly. The sound echoed through the hollow halls, sharp and painful. The human frowned, his pace quickening. He led them into a smaller chamber where the walls still stood strong. A control room, maybe, though the lights were long dead and the screen shattered. In the center lay a rusted furnace, half broken but still standing. The human lowered the boy gently onto a bed of old cloth, then knelt to work at the furnace. The mother rushed to her son's side, stroking his face. His skin was pale, his breath shallow, each one slower than the last. Her heart screamed she wanted to hold him forever, but her hands shook helplessly. "Please stay, little star, don't leave me," she whispered again and again. Tears burned her eyes, falling onto his fragile cheeks. The human struck metal against stone, sparks flying. He fed the furnace with wood from his pack, then with scraps of broken furniture. At last a flame caught, growing, warming the cold air. The heat spread slowly, chasing away the frost that clung to their skin. The boy coughed again, his eyes fluttering open for a moment. The mother gasped, clutching his hand. "He lives! He lives!" The human glanced at them, his face unreadable. Then he reached into his pack again and pulled out a small pouch. From it he poured a handful of dried herbs into a pot of boiling water. The scent filled the air, bitter and sharp. He dipped a cloth into the mixture, squeezed it, and pressed it gently against the boy's lips. "Drink," he said simply. The mother hesitated, staring at him with fearful eyes. "What is it?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Medicine," the human replied. "Old, but it may help." The boy sipped, weakly, swallowing only a few drops. The mother's chest eased slightly. Though doubt still burned, she wanted to trust, but trust was dangerous. Yet when she looked at the man's scarred face, she saw no trick, only determination. Hours passed. The storm outside roared, but inside, the chamber was warmth. The furnace glowed. The boy slept in fragile peace. The mother sat near him, her head leaning against the wall, exhaustion pressing down. Across from her, the human kept watch, his blade resting across his knees, his eyes never leaving the shadows. For the first time, she studied him closely. The scars on his face and hands, the way his shoulders carried unseen weight. This man had lived through many storms, yet he still chose to fight for them, strangers. Her lips parted, her voice quiet. "Why?" The human's eyes flicked to her, then back to the door. "Why do you help us?" she asked, her voice breaking. "You could leave, you could save only yourself, but you don't." For a long moment he said nothing. Then his voice came, low and rough. "I lost mine once, a family gone to the cold, the hunger, the beasts." He paused, his jaw tight, his eyes dark with memory. No one was there to help, no one. He looked at the boy, his voice softer. "I will not let it happen again." The mother's chest ached, his words struck deep. She lowered her eyes, ashamed of her earlier mistrust. Quietly she whispered, Then you are not only fire, you are lifeline. The human did not answer, but for the first time, a flicker of warmth touched his eyes. As night fell, the outpost groaned in the storm. Shadows moved in the snow beyond the broken walls. The mother's fear returned, whispering in her heart that danger still hunted them. The human stood, his blade ready once more. But when the boy stirred, whispering, "Mama," the human knelt again. He placed a steady hand on the child's chest, feeling the weak but steady heartbeat. "He will live," he said firmly, as if daring the world to disagree. The mother's tears came again, but this time they were not only of fear. She looked at the man, this stranger who had become more than a protector. Her voice cracked, but her words were clear. "Then we live together." The human gave no smile, no soft reply, but his silence held agreement stronger than any promise. The fire burned brighter in the furnace, and though the storm outside screamed and shadows lingered in the snow, inside that broken chamber warmth spread, not only from fire, but from something new. Trust, fragile but real, binding alien mother, child, and human together. For the first time, they were no longer only survivors. They were the beginning of a family. The storm raged for 2 days, battering the old outpost with ice and wind. Inside the chamber, the human kept the furnace alive, feeding it with wood and scraps of broken walls. The mother stayed at her son's side, whispering soft words in her language, rocking him as he slept. The boy's breathing grew stronger, his cheeks no longer so pale. Hope flickered in her heart like a fragile flame. On the 3rd morning, the storm eased, leaving the world buried in deep snow. The human stood at the doorway, his eyes scanning. The horizon, he knew quiet like this was dangerous. Silence meant predators waited. Scavengers plotted. The mother joined him, her child still wrapped in furs behind her. Her voice was low, heavy with fear. "Will they come?" The human's jaw tightened. "Yes," he said simply. "They always come." As if his words summoned them, a horn sounded in the distance. The mother froze, her blood running cold. Through the blowing snow, figures appeared, dark against the white. Scavengers more than before, armed with spears, blades, and cruel laughter. The boy stirred at the sound, his weak voice calling "Mama." The mother rushed back, holding him close, tears stinging her eyes. The human stepped forward, his blade shining in the firelight, his voice steady. "Stay here, protect him. I will hold them." The mother's heart ached. "You cannot face them all," she whispered, but the human only looked at her, his scarred face calm, his eyes burning. "I can because I must." The scavengers reached the outpost, shouting, mocking, promising pain. The human stepped out into the snow, the wind whipping around him. His shadow stretched long across the ice, one man against many. The mother watched from the doorway, her chest tight, her child's hand clinging weakly to her cloak. Her heart screamed for him not to go, but she could not stop him. The battle began, steel against steel, shouts against silence. The human fought like fire, each strike of his blade cutting through the storm. One scavenger fell, then another, their cries lost in the wind. But more came, circling him, pressing closer. The mother gasped with every blow, her body trembling. Her son whispered, "Mama, he will die," his small eyes wide with fear. "No," she whispered fiercely. "He is stronger than death." The fight raged on, blood staining the snow. The human's body moved with unbroken will, but his strength began to falter. A blade struck his shoulder, another cut across his leg. He stumbled, his breath ragged, his knees nearly buckling. The scavengers cheered, sensing his fall. The mother's heart shattered, she clutched her son tighter, tears streaming down her frozen cheeks. Then something changed. The boy struggled in her arms, his weak voice calling out, "Don't fall, please don't fall." The sound carried through the storm, reaching the human's ears. He lifted his head, his eyes meeting theirs, and in that moment, something stronger than pain filled him. Not rage, not survival, but purpose. He rose again, striking with renewed strength, each blow fueled not by his own life, but by theirs. The scavengers faltered, fear creeping into their eyes. This man should have fallen, yet he stood unbroken. One by one they fell beneath his blade, the snow drinking their blood. The last man turned to flee, but the human's blade struck true, ending the fight. Silence returned, heavy and deep. The human staggered, his blade slipping from his hand. His knees gave way and he fell into the snow, blood trailing behind him. The mother cried out, rushing to him with her child in her arms. She knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she touched his face. His eyes were half closed, his breath shallow. "You saved us," she whispered, her tears falling onto his scars. He forced a weak smile, his voice rough. "No, you saved me." Her heart broke and healed at once. The boy crawled into the human's arms, small hands pressing against his chest. "Don't leave," he whispered, his tiny voice shaking. "You are family now." The human's eyes closed for a moment, his breath catching, but when they opened again, they burned with life. Not death, slowly, painfully. He sat up, wrapping one arm around the boy, the other steadying himself against the snow. Together they sat in the ruins, broken but alive. The storm had passed, the scavengers were gone. The mother leaned against him, her son between them. Her voice was soft but steady. "We are not hungry anymore, not frozen, not afraid because of you." The human looked at her, his face weary but calm. "No," he said quietly, "because of us." The boy smiled, his small hand holding tightly to both of them. For the first time, warmth spread through the frozen wasteland, not from fire, not from food, but from something deeper, family.